Hi everyone, it's Michael again on today's video, which is going to be the final video for our Java beginner course. We'll be talking about what is called OOP, which is Object Oriented Programming. So I would like to talk about a little bit breakdown on what this course will be about. I would like to talk about what we mean by, object-oriented programming. Also, we'll talk about class. We'll talk about objects. I will also create classes and objects in this episode of Java development for beginners. Also, we're going to look into constructors. We're going to look into real-world examples and why object-oriented programming is important in enterprises application. So, stay tuned and follow us on this video and our step-to-step. So, I would like to start by saying, so far we have been able to touch few and very important parts of Java programming. We are able to go as far as learning what variables are. We learn about operators. We'll also look into loops, and also in our previous video we spoke about arrays and methods. But now we're going to move into one of the most important concepts in Java, which is object-oriented programming, which is basically also can be called OOP. OOP is the foundation of modern Java application. So, banking systems, e-commerce platform, healthcare systems, and enterprises application. They all rely heavily on object-oriented programming. So, in this video, we'll cover classes, objects, and the basics of object-oriented programming in a simple and more practical ways. So, I would like to first explain, or should I say define, what is object-oriented programming. And we can simply say it's a way of organizing our code and around objects rather than just individual function, if you understand what I mean. So it's kind of like an organizers when it comes to our code, so we don't have our code different function or maybe different method scattered all around. We can, with our object-oriented programming, we can actually organize our code instead of thinking of only, about the actions. We think about the real-world things itself. So, for instance, example like cars, we talk about grouping different, cars under a particular class, and also look at it also in another way. When you have a list of students, you can also group this also under a class, and it might be different things we want to do under that particular class, and we can actually create functions which is going to be the method of the class. Look at it, for instance, employees, bank account, product, and much more. Each of these has data and their own behaviors. So for example, let's talk about a car. A car basically has this, when it comes to the aspect of the data, it has its brand. We talk about the color, the speed. So just imagine having all this, and you actually have it different classes. Oh, sorry, as a function, or maybe as a function in different places. So, but if you can create a class, for instance, we can just name the class cars, and we can talk about the data when it comes to the brand, the color, the speed. We can talk about the behavior, the starts, the stop, the acceleration, and much more. Object-oriented programming allows us to represent these real-world entities in a code. So, I would like to iterate and maybe talk about what classes are. I know I actually maybe in the beginning of this video I spoke a little bit about classes. A class can be defined as a blueprint or a template for creating objects. In a real-world example, think about building a house. Let's look at a scenario. Before we start, the construction, before it begins, you need a blueprint, right? a class is like a blueprint of our project. Let me put it that way. So I'm going to show you an example of everything I've been talking about since, so it doesn't just look as if we're just talking and we're not really showing an example. So instead of having this, for instance, I will change this to cars. Yes. So while we do that, keep in mind, like I said, if you watch the previous video, I said the moment we change this, we have to rename the file to be the name of that class. So we're going to do that renaming. So which already, we're able to do that with our IntelliJ to help us to rename that class in particular. So now we have a class of a car. We want to talk about, what are the things we want to talk about here? We want to talk about the brand, right? We want to talk about the color of the car. And instead of having these, we're just going to create the method here. And this is just an example of what we're talking about here. So I'm just going to print out. Sorry. Just a simple printout here. I'm just going to call it car started. So that's going to basically be what I called the behavior. So, and the part where you have the brand, the color is actually sorry. I think I make a typo here. Okay, that looks good. So the brand and the color is going to be the data, while the behavior basically is going to be the stats. So the class basically define what car basically should have. And when we talk about the property is where we have the color, the brand is what we call the properties, and the behavior is the stat method that we have there. So I would like to actually talk about what an object is. So if a class, I'll say this. So if a class is the blueprint, I will just simply define an object as an object is actually the thing that is created from that blueprint. So let me go back again. So a class is the blueprint. We already said this. It's more or less like we're talking about constructing a house, and we have the blueprint. So if the class is the blueprint, object is actually the things created from the blueprint. Example, like let's say blueprints to house design. So object to actual house. Let me put it that way. I don't know if that really makes any sense. So I'm just going to show you an example of what an object is. For instance, we have already created our class, which is basically the car, right? So let's say, for instance, in this scenario, we want to basically create an object of this class. Now listen, object of the class. All we just need to do is just going to be car. Sorry, I have to start with a capital letter. You can say my car. If you're going to create the object of the car, all we just need to do, we have to put the new car. I know in my shows, we might actually be seeing this error, but just for now, ignore that because I just wanted to show exactly whatever it is I'm explaining so that I can have a proper understanding of what it is. The car here is the class, so we're referring to this class. Meanwhile, the my car here is the object. So we can always refer to this object of this class every single time we want to maybe get anything from this class. Let's say, for instance, okay, I didn't explain the part of this new car. So the new car is basically we're creating the object we're creating a new object from the class. That's why we have this new class. So the new class is basically creating a new object and from the car itself. So let me put it that way. I don't know if basically that explains whatever it is, but when we go on further, you try and understand me much more better. So for instance, we have created the object of this class and we want to maybe make use of it in a scenario, or maybe we needed to pass, or should I put it this way, we want to pass the car brand to this class. That means brand, which is actually the properties. All we just needed to do, we've already declared the object of this class. All we needed to do is just say my class, my car dot brand, which is the brand in there, and all you just need to do is going to be equals Toyota. What we just did right now is that we basically make use of the object created from that class, and we're able to pass to the property, and the property, the brand name, so which is Toyota. And this is just an example of how we can create an object from a class and how we can make use of objects of a class. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm using the same screen, because in a real life scenario, in most cases, we can decide to, of course, it's a public class, we can decide to call it from another class or from another from another class, and we can make use of it every single time. So that means it's going to inherit it. So I'm sure I spoke about inheritance when it comes to the aspect of how we can inherit a class and all the methods or the function that we have inside that particular class. So all we just did right now is that we just pass the name of the brand, and we can as well do that for, let me say, car color. All we just need to do is just say red, and we have successfully passed the color of the car to the property of the car. And excuse me, we can as well go further by trying to print whatever it is that we have actually passed there. And we can say my car dot brand, and we can as well, let me just, instead of typing all over, I can just edit it and say color. And we can also as well, from this same object of the class, we can also have access to the method that we have in there, which is start, right? So, well, of course, if you try to run this, but because I'm actually running it in the same class at this present moment, let me just better off hold on a minute. So what I would just have to do is, so that we can be able to run whatever it is that we have, is let's just go and have this method. Let's have this method, yeah, the main method, and let's copy whatever it is we have here. We'll put it here so that we can be able to run our code. So if we run this method right now, we're just gonna wait for our project to build. So we can see now that it's just printed out for us that our car name is Toyota, the color is red, and you can see it's printing the string that we have inside that particular method there. So that's just basically an example of what a class and object and how they work hand in hand. So I'll say again, the object, is basically created out from what's it called? Is when we say the class is the blueprint, the object is actually the thing that is created from the blueprint itself. So that we can actually keep that at the back of your mind. The blueprint itself is the class, and what the object basically does is that the object is actually the thing created from the blueprint. I would like to do a few other examples so that we can actually have proper understanding. I will just do one more example before we go into before we go into the next topic, which will be the constructor. Let me just try and do something around just a minute. So this is about cars. I would like to do that of students. Let me just put this back into student, and of course it's going to give us an error because we have to change the name to fit in what we needed to do. We have to rename it to students. So I will just say students. So that, okay, that was going to clear off the error. So we're going to say the string will be the student's name. We're just going to say age, and just like we did initially, we're going to have the main, so we can be able to run it. Let's make it void main. And what this will do is that we're going to basically create the object of the class. We're just going to call it student1, and it's going to be new student, and that will do. We say student1 dot the name is equals to Michael. Just gonna name it according to my whole name, right? And we're just gonna say the student age, student dot age equals to, now I think I made a capital letter, 12. Or as a string, so we'll need to put it as a string, but it's not an integer. And I think you should make this integer, right? Because we don't want to make it as a number, so we'll just make it an integer. Okay, so I'm just going to do a copy and paste because I want to have multiple students. I want to have 2 students. So I'm just going to call this student 2. I'm going to call it student 2 here. And I'm going to declare this one also. Call it student 2. And I'm just going to call this one, what's our name, and we're just going to make it 10. Yeah. So we've created 2 objects of that particular class itself. And the first one is the student one, and the second one is the student. So we can see that we're still pointing to that particular class with name student, and both objects comes from the same class, but they contain different data. Of course, if we print what student 2, we're going to bring what student 2, this part, name, age, and student 1, a name and age, we're going to see that it's going to be different, so that we don't take too much of time. Of course, we can take that as an assignment ourselves, just try and print it and play around with it, so that we can be able to move into the next topic, because I don't want this video to be too long. I just want to make sure I touch the necessary part that we needed to in aspect of object-oriented programming. So let's talk about constructors. What are constructors? Constructor basically can be said to be the setting value that is manually setting the value. Sorry, it's basically setting value manually every time and sometimes it can become repetitive. Let me put it this way. Constructor also can help to initialize objects when they are created. I'll go again. Constructor are good when it comes to setting of value manually every time and can become repetitive. So I'm going to show an example of what a constructor basically is, so that we can actually have an understanding of what I just defined now. And I will try to make use of this student as an example. So we already have the name, we already have the integer, right? And I will try, instead of just using the main here, I will call this student. Yeah. And of course, we wanted to take some parameters, which we're going to make use of that here. I think it just did an autocomplete for me, which is the name, the age, and we're just going to do something different here. We're going to take this out, and we're just going to say this dot name equals to name, yeah, and this dot age equals to age. Now we're going to actually create, sorry, I didn't put the dot here. We're going to create an object of the class. So after we've created the constructor, all we just need to do, we have to create the object of that particular class, and automatically the constructor will automatically run the objects when the object is created. By default itself, it will automatically do the running itself. And of course, we can. So we're just gonna make it Michael. Let's just put it that way, and let's close it there. So this is an example of what the constructor is, and what will happen here is that immediately we try to, call this what's it called? The class itself. Automatically, the constructor will run that particular class. This is an example. Of course, if we run this, we're going to run it. If we try to run this, we're going to run into a syntax error. We'll have to create a separate, maybe a class that we can actually easily call the constructor from, call the class from, or we can create the object of the class, and we'll be able to, make use of it, and of course, do whatever it is that we want to do with it. But just keep in mind what basically the constructor does is that it's going to run the object. Sorry, it runs automatically when the object is created. We're going to talk about reward bank account example, and this one actually will give us a little bit of should I say a little bit of a short test, let me put it that way, or little project, let me use that word. So I'm just going to call it bank accounts, yeah. We have to, of course, again change this name to, because if we don't do that, we will get an error. Bank yeah. Did I made a typo? So we're going to remove every single bit that we have here that has to do with the previous one, so that we can keep our code cleaner. That's why we were facing that error. We're going to create a string, and we're going to call it account, holder. We create another property. It's going to be double this time around. We're going to call it balance. I'll create a method. We're going to call it deposits. And this particular one will be double. Yeah, we're going to call it the amount. I'm going to say balance. Plus or minus amounts. Then we can also do this here, and we are going to call balance. Okay, and it's just going to be the withdrawal, right? What we just did here right now is that we created a class. Just for instance, like I said, it's a real world bank account example. This basically is for deposits and withdrawal. Excuse me. And already I have what is called, I have the deposit and the withdrawal. I have the properties. I have the methods, the two methods. This is, of course, minus equals to, I made mention in our previous video, we spoke about what these signs are. If you're finding it difficult to understand, you have to go to our previous video. And of course, this one is for withdrawal and this one is for deposit. We can make use of these in a real world scenario. All we just need to do is say, of course, call the account that's what's it called? Object of the class. Call it account, and you say equals new bank account dot account holder to be equals to, that's us macro, and account dot deposits equals to 1000. Let's try something here. Let's copy this from here. Let's put it here. And we'll talk about that. Yes, so that will eliminate the error that we're having. What we just did right now is basically we're trying to test the class. We have already created the object of the class. We are basically assigning a value for the property that we have in the class, which is the account holder, and we put my color. And also, of course, we try to make use of one of the method deposits. We try to deposit 1000, and we try to withdraw 200 from there. If we, for instance, try to print what the account balance is going to be for this particular logic we're doing here, just say, instead of saying accounts, just say, let's say balance. Yeah, I'll try to print this main. Let's just wait a little bit for it to run. And as you can see, it just gave us 800. This is to show you an example of a real world bank account so that we can actually have an understanding. So this is exactly how a real world application are designed. And in most cases, most of these systems they follow the pattern of the object-oriented programming. And I will say this. There are a lot of questions that were popping up in our mind, that why object-oriented programming is important. We say, for instance, without the object-oriented programming, string, like, the customer name, the customer balances, like, let's imagine that we're having, 100 of it. We have to basically keep, creating this method over and this function over and over again, rather than just creating a class and have the different method for there. And every single time we can refer to it, and we can assign whatever it is that we want to assign to it. So imagine hundreds of variables becoming difficult for us to maintain. Of course, there are millions, because we know that a lot of banks have millions of users, around the world. Just imagine you have to create millions of lines of code just trying to, rewrite the same thing rather than just following the design with object-oriented, approach. So it helps us to organize our code, make it reusable, make it easier for us to maintain. And it also makes it easier. And when we encounter any form of syntax or any kind of error, it's easy for us to debug. It's better, and it's when it comes to aspect of scalability. And I will say this: the 4 pillars of object-oriented, we have 4 major. We have object-oriented programming has 4 major principles. And I would like to talk about, this is the part we're going to talk about, what is called the encapsulation. So this is basically, protecting the data inside the object, because again, as interesting as object-oriented programming can tend to be, most of the time we start, extending data, we have to try as much as possible to protect it. This is the aspect where we, try to make use of private, so that, and also, for instance, you want to try and make sure that, the particular class, or a particular, should I say, property, or a particular method in a class cannot be accessed from an external, class. So we can decide to set it as, private, and that's an example of what encapsulation is. We want to talk about, the inheritance. When one class can actually inherit features from another, which is what I was referring to, that we create a separate class from this banking account. This line where we have, our main, we can decide to, have all this code in that particular, class. I will start, inheriting whatever it is that we have in this particular class in there. So, I would like to talk about what is called polymorphism, which is what is called one action and many form. Let me put it that way. For instance, we say we can decide to create a particular, function. I can say make sound. You can decide to say, dog is barking. You can say cat is meowing. We also like to talk about. I would like to actually, speak about also what is called abstraction. This basically helps in hiding hide complexity and show only necessary details that is, being required. This is part of the security that we, Java or object-oriented programming gives to us. For instance, driving a car, you use the steering wheel. You don't need to, understand, the mechanism or the engine, inside the car. All we just know that we're just holding the steering, and we're turning it to the left, we're turning it to the right, is working. So I would like to also highlight what I call, in every single video that I make, I used to talk about this. A common beginner mistake, we basically forget to create the object of that particular class. And in most cases, we just want to have access to whatever it is that we have in that particular class without creating the object of that class. And also, some people confusing classes and objects. Like I said, a class is the blueprint, and all the logic that happen in there, is the object. Let me put it that way. And we can actually access the object of a class even from outside the class itself. So, like I said, the class is the blueprint, the object is the real instance. We can try as much as possible, to create an example to practice. If we encounter any issue, feel free to drop on the comment section. And I will say this: subscribe to my channel so that you can, get day-to-day updates or wherever it is, because I will be engaging the users when it comes to the community. I'll be making use of the YouTube community to actually, post content, to actually put interactive, content that we can actually, talk and engage ourselves, ask questions. We can actually, talk about whatever it is that you feel like is, you're encountering as part of your code. I'll be right there to, answer your questions, practice, and also just to say again, to iterate, and to, whatever it is that we've been speaking about all the while. How object-oriented is used in industry. It's basically used in enterprises application, and almost everything is built using classes and objects. We need to put it at the back of your mind, be it a banking and e-commerce and healthcare application. A healthcare system does not really matter. Most of this, most of this system, they basically make use of object-oriented programming. This is why mastering, this is very essential for becoming a professional Java developer. So I will say this at this stage: congratulations to everybody who started this video from the first to the last. And I can say congratulations to you that you now understand the core concept of object-oriented programming in Java. We're able to talk about classes, we're able to talk about objects, we're able to talk about constructor and basic object-oriented programming principle. This is the foundation of a professional Java development. And I will say in the next video, I will try and see. I think that's going to basically be more or less, like, I will put it this way, an advanced video is going to be another separate series where I'll be highlighting and diving deeper into, because I can see that I have to try as much as possible to rush this video to ensure that we round up on this particular series and we can actually move to the next one. In the next video, we'll dive deeper into encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction with a real world example. Subscribe, continue your Java journey, and I wish you all the best in your journey. Subscribe to this channel, you will get more updates from us. For now, congratulations, you take care, bye.